The pen was already moving across the paper. For months, he'd swallowed insults, managed egos, and buried his own pride in silence. But in the frozen landscape of January 1945, something had finally snapped. The patience of the Supreme Allied Commander, Dwight D. Eisenhower, was gone. Across the Channel, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery believed he was untouchable, the hero of the British Empire, the indispensable man. He had no idea he'd just pushed the most powerful general in the world to his absolute breaking point. And when the ink on that paper was dry, one of them would be finished. This is the story of the ultimate leadership showdown of World War II, a secret crisis where the Anglo-American alliance almost shattered just months before final victory. So, how did we get here? To understand the explosion in January 1945, you have to go back to the summer of 1944. After the breakout from Normandy, the Allied armies were storming across France. And this is where the great strategic debate that would poison the Allied High Command truly began. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Commander, was a master of coalition warfare. He was a political warrior, a consensus builder, whose main job was to hold a fragile alliance of nations and personalities together. His game plan for Germany was the broad front strategy. The idea was that Allied forces would advance along the entire front, from the North Sea to the Swiss border, applying relentless pressure everywhere. It was a methodical, logistics-heavy approach designed to use the Allies' overwhelming superiority in men and material to grind the German army down. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery had a very different idea. A brilliant, meticulous, and supremely self-confident commander, Monty was also famously abrasive. He pretty much considered Eisenhower a mere staff officer with little grasp of battlefield realities. Montgomery championed the narrow front strategy, a single, concentrated blow. He argued for halting other Allied offensives, particularly General Patton's, and giving him a massive force of his own troops, plus at least a dozen American divisions, to deliver a single, decisive thrust through the north. He argued this blow, aimed at Germany's industrial heartland, the Ruhr, could end the war in weeks. This wasn't just a military disagreement, it was a clash of personalities and national pride. For Britain, with its resources and manpower strained to the absolute limit, a swift, British-led victory would have been a massive boost to national prestige in an alliance increasingly dominated by American power. For Montgomery personally, it was about proving he was the strategic genius who could win the war, if only the cautious American High Command would get out of his way. Eisenhower, ever the coalition manager, tried to compromise. He never fully accepted Montgomery's narrow thrust, but he did approve a daring operation designed by Monty in September 1944, Operation Market Garden. This was Montgomery's big chance. Airborne troops would seize a series of bridges in the Netherlands, creating a carpet for British armor to race across the Rhine. It was the narrow front in miniature. And it was a costly failure. The bridge too far at Arnhem was a bloody testament to the risks of Montgomery's vision, even if some operational gains were made. For Eisenhower and the American command, the failure of Market Garden seemed to prove that the narrow front was just too risky. The friction got worse over the port of Antwerp. British forces captured the vital port city in early September, but instead of immediately clearing the German-held Scheldt estuary, the 70-mile waterway connecting Antwerp to the sea, Montgomery pressed on into the Netherlands. Without the Scheldt, the port was useless, and Allied supply lines remained stretched all the way back to the Normandy beaches. This created a serious logistical strain, and Eisenhower was furious. While Schaiff's own operational optimism played a role, Ike saw it as Montgomery prioritizing his own ambitions over the needs of the entire Allied army. The tension just simmered. Montgomery had a habit of not attending high-level staff meetings, routinely sending his chief of staff instead, a practice that many American commanders took as pure arrogance. He openly belittled American commanders, creating deep-seated resentment. Generals like Omar Bradley and the fiery George Patton grew to despise him. The alliance was holding together, but just barely. Then came the coldest winter in 40 years, and with it, Hitler's last gamble. On December 16, 1944, German forces launched a massive surprise attack through the Ardennes forest, smashing into the American lines. The Battle of the Bulge had begun. The German onslaught created a massive salient and, crucially, split the American front, cutting off communications between General Bradley's headquarters in the south and the U.S. 1st and 9th Armies in the north. Eisenhower made a pragmatic, but painful, decision. He temporarily placed those two American armies, an enormous force of approximately 200,000 men, under Montgomery's command to restore order on the northern shoulder of the Bulge. For American generals, it was a bitter pill to swallow. For Montgomery, it was vindication. By early January, the tide had turned. The German offensive was broken, largely thanks to the heroic defense by American troops and Patton's legendary relief of Bastogne. The crisis was over. And that is when Montgomery decided to hold a press conference. On January 7, 1945, Montgomery stood before reporters. He didn't just take credit, he lectured. He talked about how the battle had been one of the most interesting and tricky battles I have ever handled. His remarks gave the strong impression that the Americans had gotten into a mess, and that he, the master tactician, had been called in to tidy up the situation. To the American soldiers who had fought and died in the frozen forests, and to the generals who led them, it was an unforgivable insult. General Bradley was so incensed he told Eisenhower he was considering resigning. The alliance was at its breaking point. Back at his headquarters, Eisenhower was filled with a cold, quiet rage. The man who had spent years balancing egos and holding the alliance together had finally reached his limit. This was no longer about strategy. It was about command. And what happened next, pieced together from the post-war memoirs of those who were there, is one of the most dramatic behind-the-scenes moments of the war. Eisenhower sat at his desk and began to compose a message to General George C. Marshall, the head of the U.S. military in Washington. He stated that the trust between the commands had been destroyed. He explained that as long as Montgomery behaved this way, a unified command was unworkable. He then laid out an ultimatum. It was him or Montgomery. He would have to resign as Supreme Commander unless Montgomery was disciplined or removed. According to the accounts, Eisenhower showed the draft to Montgomery's own Chief of Staff, Freddie de Gingand, who was at Ike's headquarters. De Gingand was horrified. He knew this wasn't a bluff. He understood instantly that if this cable was sent, Montgomery's career was over. The Americans were providing the vast majority of Allied forces, and there was little question who the combined chiefs of staff would choose in a showdown. De Gingand begged for time and reportedly drove through the winter night to confront his boss. He made it brutally clear to Montgomery that he had gone too far. For the first time, Monty seemed to realize he had fundamentally misjudged the quiet American, mistaking patience for weakness. Panicked, he quickly drafted a personal, full-throated letter of apology to Eisenhower, promising his absolute loyalty. He allegedly signed it, "Your very devoted servant, Monty." This clash of titans shaped the end of the war. But what do you think? Was Montgomery's narrow front plan a squandered opportunity to end the war early, or was Eisenhower's broad front strategy the only realistic path to victory? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The apology letter arrived just in time. Eisenhower read it, nodded, and put the unsent ultimatum cable away in his secret files. He accepted the apology, but their relationship was never the same. It became cold, professional, and distant. In this quiet, decisive showdown, Eisenhower had won a victory as important as any on the battlefield. He had finally asserted his absolute authority as Supreme Commander, proving that the Allied cause was bigger than any one man's ego. Montgomery would keep his command, but his influence over Grand Allied strategy was significantly diminished. From that day forward, Eisenhower had firmly and finally asserted his ultimate authority. The final push into Germany would be done his way, on a broad front, solidifying a victory not just over Germany, but for the very idea of the Allied coalition itself.